Hello. Yeah, while we're waiting for Barrister Ghana and Comrade Zama to connect, I like us to begin. This is not part of our discussion. Maybe we should err on the voice of the president on this aspect of the referendum. It's a free start. I'd like to start with you, Barrister Team.
Yes, sir. I think I've been waiting for that. You see, this issue of referendum has been hotly debated. Our people are interested. So the more time we take on it for people to understand, the better for Ambazonians, the better for all of us. I was even thinking of going back to it to make a few points because people misunderstand what it is. In 1961, let it be on
Yeah.
record, Resolution 1352 did not ask the United Nations to organize a plebiscite. No, it asked the administering authority to organize a plebiscite, and the UN would supervise. The role of the UN is supervision. And this takes me to this point. You see, organizing, doing a plebiscite or any election at all calls for at least two things. To organize an election, anyone in Cameroon, in China, anywhere in the world, what is organization? To organize an election, a plebiscite, whatever thing you call it, a referendum. What do you mean by that? The first thing that you have to do, whoever is organizing an election, will be to have uh, a register of the voters. You register your voters. Who does this?
I'm on the air.
Is
I'm
the
on the
local
air.
is the local government or the structure locally put there to identify and register its voters, never the United Nations. Because the voting system differs all over the world. Some countries take 18 years as a voting age, some take 16, 20. So the United Nations will never come and sit there.
Pastor Tim, please repeat what you just said again because this alone already debunks a lot of the debate we had before. Just repeat it again. You said something that is very important. I'd like you to repeat it. I think Barrister Fru said something similar to that 2 weeks ago, but then you have said it in another way, which I'd like you to repeat it. Just repeat it again from the article that is legally binding and to the fact that it is not a mandate of the United Nations to organize a referendum. Please repeat it again slowly so our
Yeah,
people can get
the
it.
United, as I said that in 1961, the United Nations General Assembly in Resolution 1352 recommended that the administering authority organize a plebiscite that will be supervised by the United Nations. I'll come to supervision. And then I was dealing with organization. To organize any poll, a plebiscite, a referendum, a local elections, require the first thing that you have to do is to register your voters. All those people who are going to vote must be registered. Who does this? It is done locally because different countries have different systems. In some parts of the world, voting age is 16. In others, it is 18. In others, it is 21. So the United Nations does not have a voting age line to come and sit there and begin to say, come and register here. And again, I don't think those who are old enough would ever say that in 1961, you found a United Nations office in Cambe, in Wum, in Manfe, registering people to vote. Were they a voter register? Yes. Where did it come from? It was the West Cameroon government that had done it. Prior to the 1959 elections, prior to the first two elections of Ndele and Foncha and so on, that a voter poll that had been done. But they could not, the United Nations could not ask them to do it. It simply asked the administering authority to do it. And so, for us to have a plebiscite or referendum, whatever you call it, we must have the structures in place to do the basic things. And this is important. I will come to it very closely. This is important because, you know, We have been arguing here, for example, that, well, we have so many blacklegs who have lived in southern Cameroon for years, francophones. Yeah, to me and you, they should not vote. But they're going to be excluded because I said it, or because you said it, or because President Sarko says it. No. There must be a text that will say these are the people qualify to vote, on which you will exclude A or B. And for the record, let us have this. All of us know, those who know it well, know that in 1993, the first chairman of the AAC was Barasa Ekontan Elad. I mention his name here clearly because it was a very good example. Barasa Ekontan Elad, his father came from Sancho, Mbo, in the Republic of Cameroon. But this man came to Victoria, in fact, in Boyabi house, they settled there and got married to a Bojongo woman. And delivered those children, including Samuel Kontan Elad. So, can we say that? Give me, oh God.
Now, Barista team, we're going to come back to you.
No, let me finish this point.
Let him learn. Let him learn. Let him learn.
Yes, because it's important. So, can we say that? Can you by yourself just go and exclude Elad? And there are thousands of them anyway. Just because his father came from over there, maybe, but you cannot do it. We need a text that will identify who should vote and who should not vote. Right now, we don't have that text available in Ambazonia. We don't have the structure to put such laws in place. So you cannot just say, okay, this man's father came from Bunda, this one came from Bafang, he's not going to vote. No. The structures must be there to do that. The law must be passed. At this time that we're talking, let us exclude the interim government. Can AG of C have structures in here in Boya, in Kumba? They don't have anything. Worst of all, I've just read the Scapo. Does Scapo have an office in Kumba, in Kambe, in Womb? They don't have one. So which are these structures to do this type of business? They are not there. The second point that you talk about, organization of any polls, is the polling stations. You expect somebody to come from New York and say that, okay, 20 people will vote in Kambe, 10 will vote in Womb, 5 will vote in Victoria. No, this is done by the local people, the local government. And before I just, we heard the president say, citing them, I've had the opportunity to say this before. The referendum in Southern Sudan was never organized by the United Nations. It was organized by the Southern Sudanese government. 5 years or 6 years after they gained autonomy from Sudan. The United Nations had nothing to do with it. The
so
referendum.
You're saying that they gain an autonomy, got the time
Yes, if you want that, there must be autonomy.
Organize themselves, and then they did a referendum.
Yes. The referendum in Scotland was never organized by the United Nations. There's a Scottish government in Scotland. They call for the referendum. They determine who will vote. For example, in the case of Scotland, they said all Scottish people will vote. All people of the Commonwealth resident in Scotland will vote. That was the rule of the Scottish Parliament. The UN had nothing to do with it. The referendum in Quebec was organized by the Quebecois government. Quebec has a regional autonomy in Canada. They called the referendum themselves. They decided who will vote. They decided the polling stations and then organized it. It was never the United Nations that did it. And then let me come down to this, since we don't have a lot of time. What do you mean by United Nations supervising a poll, elections? Call it referendum, call it normal poll or anything. United Nations has two roles to play. They may play all, or they play one. First, the United Nations can supervise an election. I will come back to deal with it. Two, they can just be observers. These are two roles the United Nations can play. And listeners should follow me very carefully. I say this as a witness and a participant. I've taken part as an active UN official in two polls in different countries. And my official functions in those elections, I was the United Nations elections officer, they call it election manager. I was in the Burundi as part of the United Nations mission there in 2019, in 2004. I was an election officer under the United Nations. We organized the poll there, got a president,
I also
and left.
understand you worked with Cote d'Ivoire
I'm
during
coming,
the
I'm coming,
transition.
I'm
Yeah,
coming, I'm
yeah.
coming. This was 2004. After 2004, we moved to Cote d'Ivoire. I was in Cote d'Ivoire as an United Nations election official. I took part in the thing. And so, what does it mean? Is what I want to explain here. What does UN supervised election mean? In the case of the plebiscite, there was supposed to be UN supervised election, but how many United Nations officials did you find in southern Cameroon? There were less than 10. The election commissioner, Mr. This Iranian guy, was in Boya for less than 6 months, if I don't even visited Boya. It simply means that when we go to supervise elections, the parties to election, the political parties, the government has already set up the structures. There's a United Nations code for transparent, fair elections.
Yeah.
That's what they go there to implement. And they don't even implement it by themselves. For example, in the Ivory Coast and the Burundi, in the whole department, call it a county, that will call it, there's only one United Nations official. I was the only one for whole division. And then we employ other local staff. What do they do? They simply go there and say, okay, for example, a polling station is not supposed to have more than 500 voters. We make sure that we tell them, the organizers, because there's a local organization organizing the elections. The Independent Election Commission, for example, will make sure that, look, you must follow these standards. We simply go to the headquarters, let me say to Victoria or to Bamenda, and all those counties and the villages, they have their local representatives organizing the election. We say, okay, this is the code. For every polling station, there should not be more than 500 people. We say, this is the code. Ballot boxes cannot be put in private homes. So you don't put them in the palace, as you have been doing. If there's no public school there, create a space for that. That's all what they
Mm-hmm.
do. And at the end of the day, when they count the results, if the ballot goes through at the accounting, there will be one or two uh, UN representatives there, just to be sure the accounting 1 plus 1 is 2. And that's what we did in the Cote d'Ivoire. They sent in what the local organizers have done. In the case of the Cote d'Ivoire, there was an independent election commission organizing it. Can we say now that in Ambazonia, what many structures, call it under this present IG, or under Mr. Choyaba, or under Mr. Anu, whoever, does he have these structures in place to talk about organizing a referendum? Again, the United Nations does not organize elections. The local people
Okay.
call it, if they came to Cameroon, for example, today, they will
Mm-hmm.
depend on the electoral registers that have been provided them by
Cameroon.
Elecam. By Elecam. The UN does not have the right to go there and say, okay, take away party's name, cancel Mr. John Fruit's name.
Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
they provide
Thank,
us the
your
voter
method.
roll. Okay,
I think you have explained that point in a very exceptional way, and that only helps to add more, I would say, more seasoning to what the president explained earlier on.